Hello and welcome to the Center for Military Modernization, Warrior Maven. I'm Kris Osborn. The world remains fixed on the tragic and significant situation continuing to unfold in Ukraine. We have some important perspective today from a great American, retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Rutter. Now, he spearheaded a specific attack with the 3rd Infantry Division during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and he helped destroy the Iraqi Republican Guard at that famous Baghdad airport battle. So we want to welcome Senior Land War Analyst from the Center for Military Modernization and Warrior Maven, Mr. Scott Rutter.
Glad to be on board, Kris, again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. If we listed his credentials, we'd be here all day, but he also does a lot of advocacy for children who lost their parents due to war, is the CEO of the Valor Network. So, Mr. Rutter, thank you so much. Let's begin by big picture kinds of discussions. Yesterday, Mr. Kirby and the Pentagon, they were talking about shaping up operations for what has been a repositioning or a shift to an attack in Donbas. Various networks are saying that attack is already underway. What does this shift look like to you, and what is it going to mean for Donbas?
Actually, Kris, it's the phase 2 of the operation. Initially, phase 1, which we spoke about 2, 3, 4 weeks ago now, and so forth, was more of a broad assault on the Ukraine, focused on destroying the Ukrainian infrastructure in certain areas, wide area. Now, what we're seeing now in phase 2, and obviously the Russians had to go back in order to regroup, not as quick as what they thought, not as detailed, as synchronized as what they expected for the actual assaults during phase 1, but they are now going to concentrate on the Donbas region, and they are refocusing, repositioning their forces, taking a look at the resources that they have, and trying to get things a little bit more synchronized, from logistics to artillery and other enablers being pushed forward, repositioning artillery units well forward in order to prepare for the attack, in order to get those breakaway areas that they really want to focus on. Not to say that Putin's going to call it a day afterwards, but if he consolidates his gains in this specific area, masses his combat forces, he could be successful.
You raise a really important point, because despite their apparent and recognizable setbacks and difficulties with the invasions, the Russians certainly have a lot of numbers and a lot of hardware lying around. And you mentioned something the Pentagon specifically said yesterday, which is the Russians appear to be learning somewhat from their logistics and sustainment failures in the opening incursion of the war, and making preparations for perhaps a longer-term engagement. How do you see their prospects, given that they haven't fared so well in any kind of infantry or direct force-on-force engagement, and have instead resorted to these indiscriminate civilian attacks?
Great questions. And the Ukrainians have really adapted because of the battlefield calculus, the analysis, the amount of weapon systems that we have. And by the way, the U.S. is stepping up recently and so forth, but more of an asymmetric battle, and understanding the amount of forces that they have in order to concentrate their efforts in key terrain and areas. Let's face it, the Ukrainians know the areas, small killer teams out there with javelins in order to disrupt the Russians and break up their synchronization, no matter what type of logistics packages that you have moving forward. When they're ambushed, or when there are minefields or even dummy minefields placed out, it's going to slow them down, and it's going to break up their efforts in order to synchronize. As we spoke about before in the past, the Russians do not have a high quality non-commissioned officer corps. It's officers going directly to soldiers, and soldiers doing the actual tasks that they're given. In the United States, and obviously NATO forces, with the training that some of the Ukrainian units have received recently from the Canadians as well as the Romanians and so forth, focused on mission command, focused on the end state, the intent, having the flexibility, having the leadership, and having the audacity in order to make decisions that if the task is not going one specific way, that they look at that end state and they adapt in order to achieve the intent of the commander, the end state.
Certainly, Mr. Rutter, this could be kind of a round 2 of what we saw before, in the sense that one of the points you made, which was extremely insightful, it seemed to me, was something you observed with the Republican Guard, which is the strategic and tactical use of intersections, crossroads, narrowly configured areas to stage these hit and run kinds of anti-armor ambush attacks. Could we see round two of that? And certainly by any estimation, the Russians didn't do so well the first time around because of the effectiveness of javelins, because of the tactics, and perhaps using buildings and terrain to their advantage to pop up and take out armor.
No doubt. But this time the Russians are concentrated more of a specific area in the Donbas area, rather than that broad front or those shaping operations that were done in order to destroy the Ukrainian infrastructure as well as the defense industry and so forth. Now, reposition and focus, the Russians will be able to mass somewhat a little bit better than before. But given the leadership, the audacity, the synchronization of that asymmetric warfare that the Ukrainians are executing and disrupting those operations, I think the Ukrainians are going to have much of the same success that they've had in the past.
You mentioned a really important point about heavier equipment going to Ukraine. DoD released an interesting list just the other day, includes Mi-17 helicopters. Sure enough, you know a lot about weapons, sir. M55 howitzer artillery. When those get in the hands of the Ukrainians, what kind of an impact are they going to have? You have to think pretty significant, given it gives them what has previously seemed to be an unprecedented ability to go after those Russian launch sites and try and minimize or take out some of those long-range land rockets and missiles the Russians keep firing. What's artillery going to do for them?
It's going to allow more than just to be on line of sight opportunities for the actual Ukrainians, tying those in with well-positioned observers, small teams going forward, strategic targets that they are able to identify with unmanned aerial systems, and being able to call for fire in order to disrupt that deep battle and that strategic effort that the Ukrainians are going to attempt, in addition to the linear battlefield or the upfront and personal fighting ambush teams, multi-dimensional with the asynchronous activities of that asymmetric warfare, hitting the flanks, going deep with new pieces of equipment, artillery, as well as the integration of ambushes throughout. It's definitely going to make a major impact and slow down on the Russians. But the key is the air support. Hopefully by the time the next couple of weeks and so forth, when different types of aircraft, the helicopters that we spoke about, and those attack assets where they can reach out and touch a little bit more of the Russian army and the Russian structure moving forward in order to support the actual direct firefight, that'll definitely make an impact on the fight.